Hey, y'all, and welcome back to the AlexAndMo I Am a PT podcast. Thank you for all those who have been tuning into our podcast so far, listening on Spotify, Google, and Apple, and also watching on our YouTube channel. We appreciate you guys. If you have yet to do so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe, like, follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So tonight we have what some people might consider a Twitter troll, but Alex and I have gotten to know him a bit better, and I gotta say, I like him. Okay, so it's great to have you, Victor Wolff, in person with us talking tonight. Welcome to the Alex and Mo podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I feel like I've got big shoes to fill in a lot of company that, I think I feel like a little bit of a black sheep. I don't have a ton of certs or a company that I'm running. So happy to be here.
No. This is gonna be great. So don't.
Yeah, it's definitely. We've been looking forward to having you on. As Mo mentioned, you've purposely or inadvertently, you've kind of paved your way in PT Twitter world, and as she mentioned, you're firm in your stance and your beliefs, and that's something that we can respect because you're just true to yourself, whether that's perceived on the outside as good, bad, and different. You stick to your guns, and that's definitely something that we like to preach on our show, and the way that Mo and I live both personally and professionally. So definitely looking forward to getting to know you, to just hear more about your thoughts. Obviously Twitter, you're very limited to 140 characters, so sometimes it makes it very difficult to have some conversations, have some meaningful conversations in a manner that you can have friendly debate. We always say the goal isn't necessarily to change anybody's mind, but just to kind of listen to a different perspective and just be open to it, which is one of the mottos here for our show is, we just want to be open to new information and just digest it and act as you wish, but thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. So, before we started the show, we were getting to know a little bit about you, and, you've been practicing for about 5 years now. Tell us about how you got into PT. Like, what was it that drove you to this profession?
Thanks again for having me on, guys. I thought I wanted to be a Major League Baseball pitcher originally as a young kid. And as I got a little older, started thinking about careers that I'd like to do. And there was a chiropractor in town who I would say is a little bit more of like a reformed practitioner in her field in my hometown. And she would work with a lot of athletes and give them, a few exercises, some treatment, and included a lot of manual therapy. And it seemed to be something that helped people get back to what they love to do. So for a lot of the people that I came across, it was for sports. So originally I thought that I would follow in her footsteps, and going into undergrad had a plan of like this pre-chiro track. And I had never really had an experience with PT until I was looking for jobs, as a college kid, just to get some observation hours and to pull in a little income while I'm going to school. And I could not for the life of me find a job at a chiropractic clinic, but I did find a tech or aid position at a local therapy company. And through that process and getting to know more about what PT entails, I thought, well, this is actually really what I want to do. It's very much in line with what I thought I'd be doing as a chiropractor. And I mean, not to really rag on other professions, but kind of the more that time went on and the more I observed each field, I thought I definitely found more of a home in the PT world. And so I got on the pre-PT track at school and did my undergrad in exercise science and a little psych at University of Nebraska at Omaha, and then went to Creighton for PT school. And I graduated in May of 17 and have been practicing in outpatient ortho full time, and then moonlighting a little on the weekends, working inpatient, anything from the ortho floor with trauma and post-op joints, or inpatient rehab, acute rehab, or just general acutes. So anything from the ICU to med surge.
So you come from a very small town, right?
From where? A small town? Smallish. I mean, 8,000 people. So in Nebraska, largest city's Omaha. And that was about 25, 30 minutes south of my hometown. So we live right on the Missouri River in Blair. So town of 8,000. Currently live in Lincoln, Nebraska, so the capital city, university town. Not quite as big as Omaha, really only about an hour away to the southwest on I-80. Hour and 10 minutes from home. Both my wife and I are from Blair. Our parents live there. We lived there actually while I went to school. I just commuted. It was like a 35, 40-minute drive. But rent was cheaper in our hometown, and having the first grandchild on both sides, we had some help with childcare if you needed it, and I didn't mind a little bit of a drive. So I think Lincoln's going to be home for us, though. We moved here about 3.5 years ago. Church and school's like a block from my house, and work. Going to be opening a new clinic for our company that's like 4 minutes from my house. So I think this is where our anchor is now.
That's awesome. So you mentioned you and your wife grew up in the same town. Did you know her as you were younger, or how did that kind of pan out for you guys?
Yeah, I definitely, we knew each other. Our families knew each other. We never really talked or hung out until college, and we didn't even go to the same school. My dad and her dad worked together at UPS. We had little brothers that were best friends, and I always tell people, and this probably won't surprise any of you, but she was shy and quiet and well-behaved, and I was pretty much the opposite of all those things. So had we tried to date before college, I don't think it would have worked out. But ironically, we were going through pictures. We've been married about 10 years now. But a few years back, we were probably 5 or 6 years ago, we're at my parents, and my mom's going through some old pictures, and there's this picture of me in 4th grade when you're in PE, and you're doing like square dancing and line dancing and things like that. And you have to hold hands with girls, and you pretend like you're grossed out, but you actually kind of want to. And I'm like, wait, who's that I'm with right here? Like, thinking that kind of looks like my wife. And she's like, that's me. That's that ugly perm my mom made me get in 4th grade. So there's a picture of us like dancing together, not on our own volition in 4th grade. Could have been high school sweethearts and things like that, but no, we didn't really talk until college.
That's pretty cool.
Small world.
Yeah.
Definitely. So how much of a role or influence has she played in your development as a clinician?
Huge, monumental. I will say I wouldn't be where I'm at without, of course, like my parents and my grandparents. I was very blessed to have like all 4 grandparents until I was 22, and still have 2 of them with me now. And my parents taught me a lot of valuable things, but that was really only half the equation. So I don't think I would be anywhere near where I am without my wife. I think I've always had a good level of work ethic. I don't shy away from things that I want to do. I'm willing to outwork about anyone, maybe not everyone, but the average person. But I didn't really have a whole lot of discipline or this mentality of like, sometimes you just have to suck it up and do something you don't want to do. And it's something that I definitely observed in my wife and have learned like from my in-laws as well.
Does your wife do anything in healthcare, or just?
No. Well, we both worked at UNMC, Nebraska Med Center in Omaha, is a research hospital. When we were in college, we both worked there as like sitters, like in a room. We both worked there as pharmacy techs. Then she went into like insurance verification while we were still like in Omaha and Blair. And that's when I worked full-time as a pharmacy tech after undergrad, like in a gap year before PT school. And I actually kept that job on the weekends throughout PT school. But she had some experience in healthcare, but not as a provider or anything where her degree was specific to that. Her last job was with a small company in our hometown. They actually were they branched out of the telephone company. in our town, and they would build billing software and accounting software for like small landline telephone companies, which still exist. And she worked full time for a while, and then after we moved to Lincoln, when COVID had we'd probably been about a year and a half into COVID, they'd reached out and asked if she wanted to work like part time from home because everyone had gone remote. So she did that for a while until a few months ago with 4 kids and being 4 or 5 months pregnant, kind of just feeling like it was time to let that go and just be home full time.
That's a true blessing, man. My wife stays home full time. She has since my oldest son was born. He's 6, and then my youngest is 3. And it truly is a blessing for her to be able to stay with my boys, and it allows me to go to work with a little bit of more peace.
Totally.
Knowing that she's there to take care of anything. Even with my oldest at school, like our school is at the front of our neighborhood, so like we ride our golf cart to the gate and drop him off, pick him up. So, but having her there is just a huge thing, And as Mo was mentioning, and I've always mentioned it, like to me, like having a partner is the most critical decision that I feel as a man you make. When you decide to pick your spouse, and making sure that you pick the right one can have huge implications, whether you have a chance to succeed or you have a tougher road. So
yeah, I have family members where you see it both ways, and I consider myself very blessed. She's awesome. We're firm believers that like nobody's going to raise your kids like you are, and just to be able to have her do that is a huge blessing. It does. I don't have to worry about things at work like I would if my kids were at childcare, and even if it was a place I trusted. Nobody's going to take care of you like your mama. So
absolutely.
Most definitely. So you said you worked on weekends while in physical therapy school. Was that challenging for you?
Yeah, it was. It's probably something that had I not met my wife and had been taught some of those lessons that I mentioned earlier, I don't know if I would have been up for something like that. But it wasn't really much of my doing. My wife is a total rock star. My son was like 6 months old when I started PT school, and my oldest daughter was born when I was about halfway or 2 years through, and people are like amazed at like how you got through school. And I was like, I didn't do squat really. My wife did like everything. She's a superstar. So, compliment that woman, not me.
Okay.
Understood.
You got the right help, right? So that's good. How much did your upbringing play in how your treatment philosophy,
Very much. So maybe not in the clinical decision making component of work, or how I'm going to approach the literature and things like that. But in terms of interacting with people, I would say it is my upbringing was probably very foundational to how I try to work with people. I'm notorious for always running about 5 to 10 minutes behind, because if I can think of one thing that I need to educate or one more thing I can show a patient, I will. And I think as long as it's manageable and you keep it to something that's not too burdensome for everyone, patients do appreciate that, and I have a lot of rapport. I'm sure there's a lot of things where I can do better, but that's one thing. To me, it's pretty simple. Like, this is the easy stuff. It's like the manners. Like, it's not hard to have manners, and you may see or hear about other clinicians or other providers in other fields, and they'll talk about like bedside manner, and like, it's not hard to have that. To me, I think that's really says something more about how you treat people, and just effort. Like, it's not like you have to be terribly intelligent or well-read or researched to do that. To me, that's kind of the easy stuff. So, I think back to like the way my dad would talk to people. It would be like 30 minutes past when we're supposed to leave wherever we are or go home. But that's just kind of how things work. And you just knew that Dad was going to talk long with everybody. And in a smaller town, you know most everybody. He still works for UPS. He drives semis now, but he did package car delivery, kind of like your Amazon delivery guy, for like 25 years. So, that's what he did, was talk to people all day. And that's kind of like what we do. When I come home though, I'm spent. I told my wife I used up all my words for the day by lunch, and she's like, "Well, I haven't talked to like an adult all day at all.
Yeah.
And I need to talk." And I'm like, "Just give me some food and sit me in front of the TV, please. Like, just let me check out." And she's like, "I'm ready to talk."
Yeah.
I definitely have some work to do, but on that stuff, I think it was pretty influential for me.
Good. I hope you didn't go to a church that had long services, because like when I was growing up, my grandmothers were heavily involved in church,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted us to stay after church and help to clean up and pack away stuff, and then they would be having conversations with people and praying, and you're looking at it, you're like, "Oh, cartoons are on. I'm hungry."
Mm-hmm.
You want to run away, but you have to stay.
That's one of the scenarios. Like with my dad, it would be like after church. So like church was like an hour.
Oh, okay.
But then you'd have like the coffee hour, and then you could have donuts, and like the kids would play around. But then it would be like probably 30, 45 minutes, and everyone's kind of leaving, and you're ready to go, and mom's rounding up. I have 3 younger brothers, so rounding up, us boys, and dad would sit there and talk for like another 15, 30, 45 minutes. And I haven't gone to church with my parents in a long time, but from my mom and my brothers, I get that's still a phenomenon that exists. So, but he's very invested in people, and so I think anyone that's working with people, or anyone that's a small business owner, kind of understands that's the bread and butter of what we do, is interacting with people.
Absolutely. Do you have plans of getting into business?
What's
or
that?
Do you have plans of ever owning your own clinic or getting into the business aspects of PT?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know exactly what I'll do, but I have that itch. I really like the practice that I work for now, and I wouldn't be opposed, if something were available with them. I think that's something I'd be interested in. But I do have an itch there. I just don't know where I'm going to go with it yet.
Well, all the best. I mean, Alex and I are both in business, so it has been a blessing for me. So, but I know everyone's journey is not the same. So
right.
Yeah, and everybody has Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was
just going to say
you need to.
Yeah, and that's everybody has a different level of risk that they're willing to take and feel comfortable with. A lot has been said, on social media, on Twitter, about, if you don't strive to maximize your income, then you're probably just an average PT and things of that nature. And, while I do feel like there is money to be made in this profession, probably not as much as we would like, given the amount of work and education that we've put into our careers. But there's still opportunity to make money. But not everybody wants that. Not everybody's necessarily after that. And some people are just comfortable with where they are, and that to me is the most important thing, is kind of being honest with yourself and knowing what you need and what your family needs, and however you can provide that. For some people, it doesn't take a lot to be comfortable and to be able to provide and live the type of life that they want to live. So it just depends on what each individual wants. But I think most of us tend to want to do a little bit more, because it's in our nature to be hard workers. You mentioned up with your family, your parents, and your dad working for UPS. Like, that's clearly not a job where it's something that is taken lightly, right? Like, it takes hard work. It takes, sweat, hard days of work to say it, to do that. So when you see that growing up, that has to have an impact on you as to how you're gonna, grow up as a boy to a man to a husband, now a father, right? All those things kind of shape, who you are and who you become based on your experiences as a kid. With that, is that something that you kind of grew up and it was kind of like a role model for you?
Yeah, and it really is. It really is one of those dilemmas that you hear about when you're younger. About. I think of this song, "The Cat's in the Cradle," and it's about a dad that's always at work, and he's always telling his son that he can't spend time with him to do this or that because he has to go to work. And as the son grows up, what he ends up doing is saying some of the same things to the dad. Basically, like, "Dad, I've got all the kids. They're sick. They've got the flu. But it's sure nice talking to you." And I think that is just part of what I've accepted as my role. But I also I want to avoid some of the pitfalls if I can. So I know my dad, like with UPS, it's a good job, actually. I mean, it's a trade. It's like I wouldn't say it's a trade, but it's a more of a blue collar job. Great job, with union benefits. UPS has really taken care of their employees over the years, but it's not easy work, and it's hard on the body. And a lot of times you're working close to 60-hour work weeks. And so like that was the norm for me. Like my dad came home really late. Our family was notorious for eating dinner like when other people are like going to bed. And I'd go to a friend's house and they eat dinner at 5. I'm like, what's wrong with you people? Like we're still like 3 or 4 hours away from dinner time. And my father-in-law is the same way. He's a mechanic and he's damn good at what he does, but he works really hard. He's worked weekends for a long time. One of my grandpas was a business owner with a jewelry store, and like that guy was like, I was going to say that guy was like a slave driver. I'm like, people are already going to not like some of my diction here, but he was. I mean, he would make people work holidays and Sundays and things like that. And the other grandpa was in the Air Force for 30 years. So, it's just kind of something that's been inculcated in me as part of my duty and my role, and knowing the trade-off with if my wife were to be home with the kids, that's something that I'm willing to take on. But I also don't want to miss some of the things that maybe my grandparents or my dad missed. And we talk about it sometimes, and I just kind of accepted like that's what dad's got to do to provide for us. And it was a blessing to have my mom home, like our whole childhood. My mom was home, and so I don't fault him for that at all. But there are things that I would like to be present for, and if I can swing that, or if I can dial it back a little bit at work, then I'm going to try to do it. But I've got that kind of that hustle gene, and so. You talked about, someone mentioned risk earlier with business, and I'm very, I'll invite risk all day if I'm betting on myself. Hopefully not in like a foolish manner, but if I'm betting on myself, I'm pretty confident. Whereas my wife is very risk averse. So finding something that works for everybody will be, I think, the challenge. If I could get my wife to sign on, I'm like, oh, it's already a done deal then, because that's the hardest task. But
yeah,
we'll see.
I honestly believe she will sign on because, as you said, if you have to bet on yourself, you risk it all. And I see that from your 140 characters on Twitter, that you trust yourself, you believe in yourself, and you're going to go with it no matter what the masters say. So yeah. I wanted to know in Lincoln, Nebraska, I know it's a college town. So there would be a relatively diverse population because of the football program and other stuff, right?
Yeah, Lincoln is actually pretty unique. It's one of in our region in the Midwest, it's one of the hot spots for refugees.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it
doesn't get cold?
What's that?
It doesn't get cold there?
Oh, it gets cold. And I think the winters get lamented by many people, but like last winter we had less than 4 inches of snow, and this year we've had hard.
How cold did it get?
You're routinely below freezing, sometimes below 0.
But Mo, you live in Maryland.
Oh, we don't get
one.
We don't get below.
You get cold and snow. So not only do you live in Maryland, But a lot of Caribbeans will move to Canada.
Because it's easier to get naturalized in Canada than it is to get a naturalized in America. So,
but it's still cold.
Nebraska is notorious for the volatility, though. When it comes to weather, the phrase around here, and I'm sure it's everywhere, but the phrase is, if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes. And you will have a day in December that's in the 60s and sunny. And within 12 hours, you could have the temperature drop 40 degrees. You could have a foot of snow in January or February, and you could have a string of days where you don't go, above freezing. But you could also get some days where it's pretty mild. Like a couple years ago, we had like 50 or 60 inches of snow. So it really varies, and it's warming up. It's been really dry lately. And we think it's humid. It's nothing like Florida. But it is a little bit of a damp. It's a damp cold, but I bet Maryland with the Atlantic, the cold you feel is pretty wet. And I've heard people say like DC, New York, the Northeast is a blistering cold when it's cold. So it's cold, but it's we truly have all 4 seasons. It's all over the map.
Cold here is 60 degrees.
Yeah. But yes, to answer your question, Lincoln's the most diverse place in Nebraska, which if you compare it to other places, it'll look more or less diverse. But that is one thing that I like about it, which I think on Twitter would surprise people, but I do.
Yeah, that's where I was leading up to.
And your typical patient population, right? So the city as a whole is probably more diverse than people would think, or know. What is your patient population diversity-wise? Like, are you still seeing primarily, Americans? Are you getting African American, Blacks? Are you getting Hispanics? Like, what is your patient population like?
If I were to spitball, and part of this really depends on the part of town that you're in, and there's 8 clinics. There's going to be 2 more opening here in about 2 or 3 weeks. So if you're more in North Lincoln, you'll see that, diversity really increase, especially with the refugee population. And this is kind of like most cities. North Lincoln is going to have more of that population. It's also going to have some spots where you have some pockets of affluence, but a lot of the lower to middle socioeconomic class is going to be in, central to North Lincoln. And then South Lincoln's certainly more affluent. So you'll probably see most of it in the northern clinics. I haven't worked those ones as much. I would say I'm probably treating non-Hispanic whites. Oh, come here, kid. Can you say hi?
Hi.
Say hi.
Hi.
All right, you go over here with Uncle Pat, okay? Three of them are with mom at a soccer practice. One's with my brother here. Maybe
I'll start. That's the first cameo we've had.
Yeah.
So you get the honor. You get the honor of that. That's the first cameo we've had of somebody's child or dog or cat or anybody joining in. So
had a cat
I think we did have a cat. But you're the first. So kudos to your princess there.
Yeah, thank you. That's my baby girl. She's 2.5.
Love it.
So I'm like that guy on the BBC that was doing like international news, and his kids were like opening the door to his office, kind of like yours, and his wife like chases him in. My brother let me down. No, I'd say it's mostly not non-Latino or non-Hispanic white, probably 80%, maybe 5 to 10% Latino or Hispanic, and then I would say maybe the last like 5% or so would be African American or even like refugee population. Few people come to mind, but I mean it's pretty representative of like the demographics of the state as a whole. So, I think the thing with diversity where I'll take an issue with something is when you take something like class or socioeconomic status and you supplant it with race. Because I think a lot of stuff is correlated, but I think a lot of the determinants that we really come down to would be socioeconomic status or class. And I think for where was I going with this originally? Oh, yes. So it's representative, like the demographics as a whole, especially for where I treat. But the thing where like I'll probably take issue with pushing diversity and outcomes and things of this nature, I'm probably kind of segueing into maybe a topic we were going to touch on anyways, is disparities and things of that nature. And so I think of my hometown, and I'm like, my hometown and my county was like 98% white, and it was like maybe a percent Hispanic or Latino, and like a percent Black, or maybe there's even a fraction of a percent of Native or Indigenous in my hometown. So a lot of the things that I saw, if you were privileged or affluent or successful or you had hardship, mostly everybody was white. And so I think those are some of the questions that I like to ask. If it's not known by now, I don't mind taking a contrarian position. I don't mind playing provocateur. Mainly, I want to bring awareness to, maybe a different school of thought or opinion that is definitely out there. A lot of people might not believe this, but like Twitter is very, very different than the general population. And so in the Twitter bubbles and echo chambers, those are the types of things that I'd like to talk about, and why it might surprise someone like a guy like me actually enjoys diversity in my community or in my kids' school and things of that nature, in my patient population. Some of my closest relationships were with people who are not white. My Spanish is very, very elementary and broken, but I can get by without my PTA who is half and can speak it fluently. So those are, I guess, if you want to segue into some of those things, we can chat about that.
Well, that's good to know, and I do agree with you that I honestly do believe if we just took race out of it and kept it at a socioeconomic levels, we'll have a lot more in common than we do. But because of politics, I think that had a huge influence on making race the dominant issue. For someone who treats in rural, suburban, and urban areas, there are a lot of similarities for people who are lower middle class, upper middle class, and if you're affluent. You have more in common. A Black person and a white person in a lower socioeconomic group will have more in common than they would have with someone who is white, who's affluent, or Black, who's affluent. And we're sitting here speaking from a position of privilege, even though our childhood was not as privileged, but we worked damn hard for where we are at. So we could understand the struggle. The issue is that I think a lot of people have is that to totally dismiss it and not say, oh, we need to discuss the systemic issues that plague the US or us, even in the profession. I think that's what a lot of people have issues with. And the reason why I'm not gonna be like, oh, Victor, we can't talk anything socioeconomic with Victor because he doesn't understand is I want to see how you reason stuff, and I'm getting to understand you a lot better now that you shared about your bringing and your spiritual values. And as I said to you recently, you and I have more in common growing up Episcopalian and stuff like that too. So it doesn't matter. I mean, I grew up in the Caribbean. You grew up in Midwest Nebraska, cold as. But we have more in common than we actually thought we did.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the reason that the soul, I won't say maybe the soul, but the intensified focus on race recently has bothered me, because I do think we have a lot more in common. All of us do, really. And the minute we start talking about what divides us, you're on a path to division and tribalism. And if you already had some latent racism, you're only going to stir that up, and it's not going to help anything. And I think seeing especially cultural forces, politicians lean into it on both sides, regardless of race, it's cheap. And that type of stuff I just really don't care for. I'll tell you, in Nebraska, like, most people that I know that aren't white are married to someone who's white. And the racial narratives I see coming, from in the headlines and streamlined from our institutions don't really, they're not adopted in the households that have someone who's white that's not white that I know. And that's just my experience. I know that there's other places where there's a lot more of a diverse, demography. And there probably are a lot more people of the same race that are married that aren't white. But here, a lot of people say, like, my husband's white, or like, my husband's black. Like, I definitely don't feel this way. And that's something I think, if we could get past just seeing a skin color or a degree of melanin that you've got, or the country that you moved from, or that your family immigrated from, I think a lot of the divisions you see would be improved. I think it's profitable and it's rewarding to bad actors to stoke those flames and divisions. And it's a lot like how I view the immigration issue. Like, as long as that stays an issue, you have cheap labor that one side's after, and constituency or a voting bloc that the other side's after, and it stays a problem that rallies their base, and then they can drive people to the polls based on that issue alone. It's really a balanced approach would work quite well and please most people and solve a lot of our ills, both domestically with our workforce and for the people that are dying trying to come here. I don't fault a single person that's trying to come here to better their life. I'd probably do the same thing. But there's a lot of hardship, and there's some bad actors that definitely take advantage, more specifically like the drug trade, that I think I don't really see that issue getting solved because it's too beneficial to people that want to weaponize it. And that's how I feel about race.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that, obviously I don't try not to get too involved in, especially in the Twitter world, in dealing with politics, because I just feel like it's something that it's a lose-lose situation. I mean, usually most people that are engaging in any kind of political dialogue, they have their thoughts, their beliefs, and that's not going to change. And especially in Twitter, where everybody, has 140 characters, so you can't really explain yourself too well. And I always say Twitter's not real.
No.
People,
it's a hellhole.
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of real because I met Alex on Twitter, and now
well, that's the thing. Like there's genuine people out there that are genuine in what they portray through their social media platforms, right? But there's a lot of people out there that like to conform to what the popular narrative may be to sort of fit in, and not necessarily really speak how they feel or what they believe. And again, that's what Mo and I have said about you, that you are not like that. You're going to speak your mind and hold your beliefs, and it doesn't necessarily have to conform. So you mentioned that
with less travel.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
it's not. I always say it's a hellhole, but gosh, that's how I consume news, because I can really filter, voices that I've watched over the years and have come to trust, and the ones that I don't really trust, I don't have to turn on like cable news or any of that. I can follow clinicians who have great insight. I can network with people. I can talk to people and be on a podcast like I am now. So it's definitely not all bad. And it's real, but it's more of an and both situation. It's also a distortion of reality if you think Twitter is representative of the population. I think it's something that like 22% of Americans are on Twitter, and 90% of tweets are by 10% of the users. So if you do the math, it's like 2% of people are doing 90% of the tweeting. So you could do a poll on Twitter, and depending on your following or just on its user base at large, it's going to be very different from what the public thinks. And on top of that, I think it is, we'll find out here in a few weeks with, I think Elon Musk has a lawsuit coming up, or a trial coming up with Twitter. And there's a whistleblower that talks about Twitter misleading how many of their accounts were fake. So we'll find out how much of it really isn't real, with bots and things like that nature. But yeah, it's not all bad. Not all bad. I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't have social media.
No, definitely. I mean, I think it plays a huge part, and when used appropriately and used genuinely, I think there's a huge amount of benefit to it. But again, some of the things that have kind of, made you a unofficial, some may call you a troll or a contrarian or whatever the case may be. We've had, in the last couple of years, obviously going through COVID, you've been very vocal about, from the very beginning, at least from what I've, been able to pick up through your tweets and stuff, about the vaccines and the lockdowns and the things of that nature, right? And that's a very hot topic to this day. I mean, we still have, information getting put out about the vaccines, and then, the president got, tested positive like 2 weeks in a row. I think we just found out that the first lady also tested positive as well. And there's been a lot of dialogue. We've had
the news.
Say it again.
I really haven't been listening to the news then.
Wow. I get the news. Like for me, Twitter is my news, right? That is how I consume the news. I can't watch the news on TV. It's very disappointing and sad to me, because there's just so much bad, and they know that the bad sells, and I just can't live like that. Like, I wake up and every day that I'm blessed to open my eyes and breathe some air, I want to make the best out of it. And I don't necessarily want to be consumed with all the negative or the perceived negative that's out in the world, right? So like I as Victor said, like I filter my stuff. Obviously I try to keep it balanced. I like to hear other people's points. I want to hear a different perspective. I may not necessarily agree with it, but I want to be open to it. And I feel that way I have more control over stuff like that. And that's why, like, I enjoy Victor on Twitter, because he always brings a different perspective to it, right? So, we'll have, Todd, which is somebody that I know that Victor has gone back and forth with.
And
I'm going to use this opportunity to reach out to like the 10 or 15 people that have blocked me.
Whoa!
And hopefully you could. Everyone. Well, Jerry didn't block me, but
with that, man.
yeah. There's probably, I'd say about 10 or 15 that I've gone back and forth with that I don't see their tweets anymore. I don't know. Use it as an invitation to get to know me, or maybe reconsider. I think you'll find, if I'm arguing with you, that's way different than how I'd sit down and talk with you. And my wife's told me this. I've talked to people in my neighborhood that we talk about all sorts of things, and I don't think they catch sarcasm or me trying to be sardonic or Socratic as much as I think that it appears to be. And so sometimes I think just the in-person interaction is way better. But I can argue with you, and I think you're wrong, and I'll tell you why, and I'll offer my best argument as to why I think I'm right. I'm not right all the time, but it's not personal. I actually like to just take an issue, stay on it, and then after that issue's done being debated, I'm not gonna not talk to you. I have lots of friends that actually I probably don't agree with. Like I'm a Catholic dude with 4 kids that grew up in a small town. So a lot of people that I interact with, I know do not think the same way I do or share all the beliefs I do, and I get along with them just fine. I don't mind talking the religion and politics. The motto for my grandparents was, "You don't talk that with people." But I think if I see everyone kind of saying the same thing, and I'm like, I don't feel that way. I don't believe that. I don't mind speaking out about it.
So one of the most recent things that came up on Twitter is I think you and I back and forth as well, and I have to also apologize for a tweet that I made that came across with the throwing my post a swine. So I didn't mean to call you a swine. You're not that. So I have to make a
Oh,
public apology for that.
it's
But it was
okay. No.
the stance that as an APTA professional body, we shouldn't be commenting on uh, those sort of issues. And
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot about the semantics on what is if abortion should be allowed or not allowed. So I know the Catholic faith is strictly against abortion.
Mm-hmm.
I am pro-life. I do support kids being brought to this world, but I do have wiggle room for pro-choice people making their decisions because I am not living their life. I don't know their financial situation. I don't know what's going on in their home, and I'm of the belief that I shouldn't force my beliefs on them. It could be the same for people because I'm gay. They would be like, "Oh, you shouldn't be gay," and I've heard that. So I try as much as possible not to force my spiritual beliefs on other people, but I will argue back and forth. But I am pro-life with wiggle room for pro-choice. So sort of in the middle. Um,
You're in line with roughly 2/3 of Americans. I mean,
mm,
2/3 of a majority of Americans. It's around 2/3. Okay. I'm not going to try to nail down an exact number, but roughly 2/3 of people in this country think abortion should be legal in some degree. But that same, rough fraction of people, maybe not the same exact people, but 2/3 of Americans also believe like there should be some restrictions on abortion. And that's something that I think is worth acknowledging when we talk about it. But I
mm,
also think about, I consider it a civil rights issue. I think in politics and in marriage, like compromise is essential. I do. I don't believe in compromising on civil rights. And so that's why I take, a position that is not going to be held by either of those 2/3 groups that I mentioned. It's going to be a smaller, group of people. Do I think that a majority of a democracy supporting something means that it's just or right or wrong? No, I think a lot of times in history, there's examples where an injustice would have been supported by the majority of the constituency. And so I think, I don't demonize you or look at you in a way where I wouldn't associate with you or anything like that. I would just be open to having a debate. I think it's something that I view as a civil rights issue. And I don't love the term pro-life because I think it's indirect. I'd say I'm just anti-abortion. And I think it's because there's a second person involved in the pregnancy that really has no say or no voice. And if you didn't have medical waste bins, you could have mass graves. I think you'd have like 60+ million just in the last 50 years. But that's a group of humanity that is underrepresented and defenseless in my view. And so that's why I take more of a stern approach on that one.
okay. So do you think that the APTA should have received a statement on that?
I don't. One, because I think the statement or the position they took is wrong, and that it's unjust, and that it violates the rights of an individual. I mean, if we can do intrauterine surgery to correct cardiac abnormalities or to resolve spina bifida, or we use diagnostic imaging, I mean, not even halfway through the pregnancy to reveal things about the second person that's involved, I think that person's worthy of protection. And honestly, there's someone that's receiving health care. So for a medic or like a healthcare association, a professional organization to take a position that totally ignores this second being and someone, if they're seen as wanted or economic circumstances allow for them to not be as burdensome to their parents, they're seen as a patient. And that's where I think they've gone wrong. Even if I were to step back from my position and say, okay, let's not take a stance on it. Why don't I think they should get involved? Because it's divisive. In my state, the Republican Party is very much associated with the chiropractic organization, who organizes very well locally. And most of the people that are going to push the initiatives of physical therapy are going to come down on the Democratic side. We have a unicameral legislature. It's just one chamber. It's 47 or 49 senators, but it's nonpartisan. But what you'll find is like, these are lobbies, and I don't want my profession to become more of a partisan lobby. And I think a lot of Twitter commentariat is pushing for them to be more partisan. And I see Twitter as an echo chamber that's really not representative of even the profession as a whole. And so that's why I take issue with it. I don't think we should delve into issues that don't directly impact physical therapy. Now, I will say this. If the APTA were to switch all the position on all these statements and go to the other side, I think me and everyone who agrees with me would probably flip their opinion, and everyone else who says that the APTA should be outspoken would probably flip theirs as well. And I think that's just human tendency and bias. But ultimately, I'd argue that it's not relevant to physical therapy, and that it's going to further divide the profession and have people like me a lot less likely to pay dues and be a member.
Are you currently a member?
No, not currently. I've been one on and off. My employer would pay for it, but by the time I would have had a discount to go to CSM last year, it was kind of a wash. So no, not currently.
And then you mentioned that, in your opinion, specifically about the topic of abortion, that it's not pertinent to physical therapy, in your opinion. But we have pelvic specialists, women's health, obviously not men's health, but we do have men's health, but not necessarily pertinent to pregnancy per se. But, that group of therapists has been very vocal into how it does play a part, how we as physical therapists do play a part in dealing with the patients that are, on the fence about having an abortion or need to have an abortion because of medical reasons, personal choice, whatever the case may be. So what is your answer to them? Because these are clinicians that are working with these individuals on a day-to-day basis, saying, hey, we do have a position here. This impacts the patients that I see on a day-to-day basis. Whereas, you are in Nebraska working with primarily an orthopedic population. Yeah, the chances of you actually dealing with somebody that has to deal with these circumstances, probably not as often. So what is your response to that?
My response would be is that I hear your point that this is a complicated issue. Initially, I would argue that there are other options, and I'm not an OB, okay, but I think a lot of times abortion is sold as like the only option with no alternatives to a woman, or it's sold as something without adverse effects. I think both of those premises are false. On top of that, I would ask you, are we also consulting the PTs who work in the NICU? I mean, we're dealing with babies who are viable, who survive at a gestational age that in some states can be legally aborted. They're denied personhood. So I would say, are we talking to the nurses in the NICU? Do people who are anti-abortion have a voice without being shouted down? I have nothing to lose. I don't have a business. I don't sell anything online. So I have no problem sticking my neck out and asking questions like this. There are a lot of people, and maybe, for every 2 people that criticize me, there's a person who will privately message me saying like, hey, like, thanks for saying that, or keep going, or like, just so you know, you're not the only one. There are a lot of people that have fear of retribution. And I think there are numerous examples in the last 5 years with social media that if you hold the wrong opinion, you'll get shouted down, you'll get discredited. You may even fear you'll lose your job or your opportunities at promotion. So I would say, are we talking to nurses that are anti-abortion that work in the NICU? Because I could justify it from that position. I'd talk about people who work in peds. You work with people with developmental delay, Down syndrome. Did you hear recently that I think it was one of the Scandinavian countries, Iceland, they eliminated Down syndrome, meaning they aborted all the fetuses that were diagnosed with Down syndrome in utero. So we look at abortion, when you look at the metrics, you look at where they strategically locate their clinics. They target people who are typically lower socioeconomic status, who tend to be less white on average, and who tend to be seen as a burden. And so here I see profession talking about, talking about able-bodied language and things like that, and standing for people that have disabilities, and patient first language. Don't refer to them as a para or a quad or wheelchair bound. Like, use patient first language. And here you are having no problem with someone being aborted solely because they have Down syndrome, or because they're female, or because they're seen as a financial burden. And these are the same people that talk about disparities and disproportionate outcomes. And if you look at abortion, it's full of disproportionate outcomes for all of these groups that aren't white males that are able-bodied. So I see an underlying hypocrisy there. And I think if anything can be taken away from this, I just don't like hypocrisy. I'm guilty of it myself. So I would talk about that. Babies in the NICU, people with Down syndrome, people you really say we need more resources and funding for them to get care in schools with their programs through therapy. Yet you have no problem being that the reason that child's denied a chance at life, because their parents get to dictate whether or not they're worthy of personhood. Or, have you seen a celebrity lose a baby in miscarriage? Do you ever hear it called like a fetus or a clump of cells or things like that? Like, no, it's called a baby. I have yet to meet someone who's asked, my wife or any other pregnant woman about her fetus and things of this nature. So there's this dichotomy or cognitive dissonance, really, of it's a baby, but it's not a baby, when I don't need it to be a baby because it's inconvenient. So that's how I would counter it.
And you're staying true to yourself, which again is something that I can admire. So I'm using that because you stick to your guns, and which is good. It's better that you do versus portraying something on social media and being something else in real life. Hypocrisy, you don't like that as well too. So
yeah, there's plenty of examples of those, and those are people that I tend not to respect, even if they agree with me.
And you're right. You will get those direct messages when you go against the grain and support you, because representation does matter. It matters for Alex and I because we have created a podcast where we try to talk about PT-related issues, social issues, sports, and feature like black and brown therapists. But we want to be inclusive of everybody because the profession is very diverse. And having a Latino and a Black person, one coming from South America, one coming from the Caribbean, doing this, it shows representation. So your voice for people who are afraid to speak their truth because of fear of being ostracized. And I know people say clients will find you on Twitter, and it's not good for us as professionals to be arguing with one another on Twitter because it doesn't look good for the profession. But some things actually need to be discussed. And I appreciate you being a devil's advocate for certain issues. It does make me think at times, okay, yeah, maybe Victor has a point. But sometimes it could be hard arguing with you, though. Seriously.
I think that we're all better off when we're getting things out in the open and we're being honest. I mean, that's something where, like, my wife and I talk about this. Like, there's couples, you're like, man, they pretend like they don't fight. Maybe they don't fight. But, like, in our mind, we're like, well, if you're not, like, disagreeing with your spouse or with someone that, like, one of your friends or one of your coworkers, when you do disagree, that's just going to fester and lead to other problems, or maybe the relationship's not on the level where you are covering some of the bases, or you're not covering some of the bases that you ought to be covering. So I think if you truly appreciate diversity, you appreciate diversity of opinion. And I'm sorry, I just don't see it in most higher level institutions these days. And so that's why I have no problem asking some of these questions. I think it's a sad state of affairs when you have people who have an opinion that's probably shared by a good chunk of the population or of the profession, or maybe even a majority sometimes, but they fear blowback because of they have a position of status and you can't afford the negative pub.
So do you think that with the National Association becoming so quote unquote partisan, that it's really
Total.
prevent people from becoming members, or it's more like a financial thing for people that it's costly?
I think it's both. That's another thing I'd love to talk about is cost of journal subscriptions, professional membership, tuition, things of that nature. That's where a lot of people that operate in those industries, I would love to nail them down on some of those topics. We probably don't have time for that today, but I do think part of it is probably cost. I've heard that one a lot. But a lot of employers will pay that nowadays. I do know some people personally that it's like, no, they really do not represent my opinion. And people that I think like other people know, it's not just some Joe Schmo, but there's also like students, first year students that I'll get messages from, and they're like, man, I can't say, like, I just love that you say this because there's no way I could ever say that in class. And I think that's kind of a tragedy. And I really don't want to see the professional org go that way. But if you look at it, and I kind of see this in local politics too, for like state senate, it's a $12,000 per year salary, and you have to give it like 60% of your working hours each year. A person like me with 4 kids can't do that job. A lot of people, if they have a family, or maybe just financially it's something that they can't swing, or they don't have an interest in academia, getting your PhD or doing residency, or trying to work as faculty, whether it's adjunct or full-time, that is something that you're just not, you're probably going to have some barriers. And so I think a lot of the, if you broke it down by socioeconomic status and marriage status and how many children these people have, I think you would find a group of people not very diverse in terms of the things that I mentioned in, leadership positions at schools and in APTA. And so I think it is something that's becoming partisan, and you see a lot of college educated whites moving to the Democrat Party. You see a lot of realignment and shifting going on. And I do think the APTA, if you looked at it now and some of the statements that it makes versus 5 years ago, or even like 10 years ago, I think it would be drastically different. And so I do think, sadly, it's becoming more partisan.
And along those lines, obviously right now the big news topic is the president's student loan forgiveness. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on how that relates to our profession and the return on investment? We've had discussion, Mo, myself, and some of our other guests, where the return on investment isn't necessarily the greatest. It's pretty well documented the amount of money that PT students are having to spend for a doctorate degree to then come out and make 70, 75K, depending, obviously that's dependent on location, setting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what is your, I guess, how do you feel about our profession in terms of the return on investment, the amount of debt taken on, how the president's proposal factors in or doesn't factor into that, in your opinion?
I don't know if it'll hold. It's an executive order. It's likely to be met in court. We'll see if it goes through. I'd benefit from it. I have more loans than I do, loans for my mortgage. So, I stand to benefit from something like this. I don't think it's a good idea. the majority of student loan debt's held by professionals that are upper middle class. People with a college degree, especially a graduate degree, and they have a lot more debt because they've gone to school longer, but they also have much better outcomes financially. It's not really canceled or forgiven. It's just paid by the taxpayer, and 2/3 of taxpayers and Americans don't have a college degree. So I think you really see, working people, middle class, upper middle class people, and wealthy people that maybe didn't go to college, paying off the college student loan debts of a lot of professionals with grad degrees. So I think it's rewarding the base. He's thrown a little bit of red meat to the base. I mentioned college educated whites kind of moving to the Democrat Party. So I think, within 3 months of the midterms, timing is probably strategic. I do think it's a problem. Like, student loan debt is a problem. I can speak to it myself. What you've just seen is an attempt, if it were to go through, to let off the hook the people that contributed to the problem. You have predatory lending and guaranteed lending and institutions that hike tuition by like 4 or 5% every year. And like my program, there were 60 people in my class. I think it's up to 80. They're trying to get up to 90 now. And that is because pharmacy is not pulling their weight. And so the School of Pharmacy and Health Professions at Creighton basically had to make up ground, and they went and added 20 to 30 slots to their PT class, which I think will have downstream effects of flooding the market in the Omaha area. And, I don't know if it was totally necessary. I think it was, these institutions operate like corporations. And I think if people would look at that and criticize them and really take a skeptical approach at higher education the way they do with private corporations, I think we'd be much better off. I think they need more scrutiny because I think you look at the cost of higher ed, the cost of childcare, and the cost of healthcare, and what has happened in the last 20, 30 years. They are all exponentially shooting off the graph, where like CPI and inflation are just a steady increase. And even things like airline flights and televisions are plummeting relative to CPI, but higher education is something that has increased exponentially at the same time that the administrative, the percentage of the employees that are administrative because of regulations and things of that nature have also increased exponentially. You've probably seen the graph of, the x-axis is, time over the years, and the y-axis is the number of employees. And like nurses and doctors has been pretty steady. It increases slightly, and then there's like a mountain of administrative positions that have increased. So you're paying salaries of people that are non-revenue generating, and I think that's contributing to this high cost in healthcare, this high cost in higher education as well. And with guaranteed loans, there are people that would otherwise not get a loan, or maybe say, no, I should probably do something else. Just financially, it'd be better for me. I could afford it. They're taking out tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans. It's a problem, but it's not just PT. I think we need to look at what we incentivize. And right now we're incentivizing people taking out loans that they think, oh, I'll just pay those later. It doesn't matter what the amount is. I just want to do this and I want to go to school. And I think if you just try to transfer that debt to the American taxpayer rather than crack down on the predatory lending or the tuition hikes of the universities, you've just re-incentivized the whole thing because you just bailed them out. So in short, that's kind of my take on the topic. Even though I might get 10 grand forgiven off my loan, am I going to take it? Yeah, I'm going to be paying taxes for decades. So in my mind, I'm kind of paying it off anyways, but I don't think it's a good idea. And now you've just probably contributed to the problem of inflation with all this discretionary income that would normally be thrown at loans. Now you have more money chasing the same amount of goods. So I'm not thrilled, but I don't know if it's going to hold.
So Victor, as we get, close to wrapping up here, I mean, it's been a great conversation. I feel like we've gotten to know you a little bit better, way better than, again, 140 characters allows for. And earlier you made the comment, if you could reach out to some of the individuals that have blocked you on Twitter. Just in general, like, what would you want people to know about you and who you are as a man, a husband, as a physical therapist, that you probably can't get across the way that you would like on Twitter or any social media platform for that matter? Like, what is the takeaway that, you know, people watching this, and because I know that we're going to have a lot of people watching this, just based on on your history in Twitter. But what's the takeaway? I mean, because I'm going to tell you right now, like, I've interacted with you on Twitter. I've never, and like I said before, like, to me, it's always been like a learning experience, to just hear your side, hear how you process things, and then look at the way that others are processing it, right? So for me, it's always been kind of, like I said, just a learning experience. I like to listen to people and just take what they say and kind of put it together, and for me to digest it and come up with my own things. And there's been times where I'm like, you know what? I kind of feel like I'm falling in line with what Victor is saying, you know, and there's other times where I'm like, I see a little bit of that, but I get that too. But yeah, like, what is it that you want? Because I feel like you're a genuine guy. Like, I don't feel like there's any, like, this is a front. Like, this is like Victor just trying to be a contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian, right? Like, I feel like that's just who you are. How, you know, your experiences shaped who you are, but maybe other people don't get to know that or see that. So what is it? Like, what is Victor? Who is Victor? And what is that, like, you know? I don't even know if I'm making sense right now, but
yeah, no, I get what you're saying. You know, I think like I said, I've got like a few hundred followers. Like, I don't have time to like build a presence on there. So I'm not trying to like grow a presence to sell something or to do ads or anything like that. I simply see conversations not being had that I think need to be had. And typically you're not going to have time like this to talk about it. I think it's 280 characters now. It was 140. I think it's 280 now, Alex, but still not enough. So if I see an issue like I think is just really really distorted in terms of the perception, you know, on Twitter compared to real life, like the trans sports issue or the bathroom issue. Like, to me, I'm pretty sure most polling shows it's like a 70-30 issue, and most people are like, I think if it's like, it should probably be based on sex. Females should probably have sex-specific locker rooms, bathrooms, prisons, sports. To me, I think it's asinine that a lot of people feel like they can't say that, and so that's something where I'll rib people about it. I think the reason Todd blocked me was because I had a pregnant man emoji from Apple, and I had my brother cut Todd's face and put it on it. And so I would just throw it at him once in a while. But I'm like, if you truly believe that, then that shouldn't really be an issue. Am I trolling? Am I being a provocateur to some degree? Yeah, you could call it that. But like, if you look at the issue, and I'd probably like to use this opportunity to ask the APTA Sports SIG. Okay, I think it's Eric Myra. He formed a DEI committee, and he was proud of that. And here's my question to you. There's a female athlete SIG as well. Okay. And then there's a DEI committee for the sports SIG. You have a competing rights issue going on here. And so you want to promote people that say they identify as trans and their ability to live out their life the way they see fit. So that, you know, if you're a trans woman who's like biologically you're male, but you identify as a woman, you think you should be able to go into female specific spaces. I'm going to ask him, hey, what would you do about that? Because you also have a female athlete SIG. Like, people ask me, do you have trans patients? I've had a couple, I think like 3 now. I don't use pronouns. I call them by their preferred name, just like I'd call a William who says his name is Bill, or a Robert who says his name is Bob. I go by your name that you tell me. But to force everyone else to go along with your preferences, to some degree, I like to draw the line on that issue. So I think on that one, I will take a harsh stance. And then that will usually devolve into me being called racist and things of that nature. I don't think that's who I am. I just think on this issue, we ought to talk about it. And there's really not a discussion being had, because you're trying to placate and appease people that too many groups of people, or people that will never be, you'll never be able to please them or placate them. And so those are the types of things where I'm like, well, I'm going to lean into that because I know there's people that agree with me. And I know the population at large is very split on this issue, or perhaps, in opposition to what this person may be promoting or what our institution may be promoting. I'm going to try to rile something up so people talk about it. I want to raise awareness about it. So do I take some methods that are more shock and awe and things of that nature? Yeah. But it's because I think a discussion that should be had is not being had. And if you claim that you support women on all these other issues, and you get upset that, like, at the women's March Madness tournament, the girls had 25-pound dumbbells and less to work out with, and then the men had, like, the amazing weight room. If you felt that way, but then in the same breath, you try to tell me that males should be able to compete in female sports, like, well, no. We should sit down and talk about that. You have competing rights going on here, and you're going to have to decide ultimately, like, what is your position if you're going to start taking positions on things, especially on tough issues. So, I don't think maybe I'm as bad of a guy as I'm built up to be on social media, but at the end of the day, I can lay my head on the pillow at night. It's okay. I've like I said, I'm a Texas fan in Nebraska, so I don't have a huge problem with people not loving what I might say.
A fitting ending, I think. A fitting ending for sure. Victor, man, I really appreciate it. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It was definitely a pleasure and a good time to sit and chat with you and just get to know you, kind of get your perspective on things and just try to better understand, where it is that how you get to your end points on these topics and all the other stuff. Again, it was a pleasure having you, man. Hopefully we can continue the conversations on Twitter, because I agree that there's certain points that need to be said, and we need to just be able to hear everything. We're not always going to agree with it, but we got to be able to at least listen to it, absorb it, and then be able to to make individual decisions and then respect those decisions, because at the end of the day, I think that's what we deserve as human beings. I think we just need to be respectful. The idea that we're going to always get along and always going to see eye to eye, that's just not going to happen. But we just need to do better to be respectful of everybody's opinions, right, wrong, or indifferent. And I think if we're able to do that, then we can have these conversations, and they can be very meaningful conversations.
Yeah, the feelings are mutual. I really appreciate you guys reaching out. Thanks for having me on, giving me a platform to talk. And I agree. I think, when we're really open-minded and we have the opportunity for people to talk, and it just feels more transparent. I think we'll be better off, even if people aren't going to get their way on certain things. As long as we have a more transparent and open process, I think it's better off. There's a lot of mistrust when we don't have that.
Very true. Very true. So thank you again, Victor, and all the best, and congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
the upcoming. So I'm sure that'll keep you busy and away from Twitter for a while.
Oh, well, unless I'm holding the baby late at night and I got nothing else to do. Yeah, you can tell, like, on my days off or weekends.
Emojis, okay?
Yeah. Yeah. I won't share it on Twitter, but I'll send you guys a picture and keep you posted.
Awesome. I really appreciate that.
No problem. Yeah.
Again, to all of our followers, thank you very much, guys. We really appreciate your support. Continue to subscribe, comment, like, share with your family and friends. We really appreciate it, and we're here to keep putting out, good content, good interviews, good information out there for everybody. So everybody have a good evening. Take care. Peace.
Peace.